Good evening. Welcome to the Select Board regular meeting. Today is Monday, May 16th. This session is being, we hope it's being audio and video recorded. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A couple general announcements. The town of Long Meadow is seeking interested residents to fill 3 vacancies on the town's finance committee. Each vacancy is for a 3-year term and will commence on July 1st, 2022 and go through June 30th, 2025. Interested persons must fill an application available on www.longmeadow.org/civic alerts and submit to the finance director by noon on Tuesday, May 31st, 2022. I cannot emphasize that the Finance Committee certainly is one of the most important committees in town, and this would be an important position to fill. Another important announcement is voter registration deadline. The deadline to register to vote in the annual town election for folks who are not currently registered to vote is Wednesday, May 25th. The election is June 14th. Yes. Please contact the town's clerk office for more information. You can visit the town's clerk page on www.longmeadow.org. The annual town election, June 14th, and the voting is at the Long Meadow Community House. Okay, we are ready for resident comments. Do we have residents to comment?
You have to make comment?
Is
Right.
Mike here?
That's me.
Were you able to?
I
do
just saw
anything
your, are
with
you
the
Marsh? Yeah, I just saw your email. I have them.
pictures? You have, will you be able to show?
Yeah, I can show them.
Excellent, perfect. Can't tell you how many times I tried to send them before. I've had success. Good evening. My name is Marjorie Bruns. I live at 39 Hazardville Road in Long Meadow. Let me preface my remarks by saying I am 74 years old and I have asthma. I use an inhaler to work in my yard. Today, Eversource submitted a plan for a gas pipeline project with the Massachusetts Energy Facilities Siting Board. If their plans get approved, we will have a pipeline going through the center of town with a 333% increase in gas supply. More infrastructure and more emissions. If we get the pipeline, we get an industrial gas complex to service the pipeline. Eversource is euphemistically calling the complex the POD, the point of delivery. Their postings show a 5-building complex with one building having a 40 by 80 foot foundation. 3 buildings will be owned by Eversource and 2 by Tennessee Gas Pipeline. There will be security fencing and machinery and piping inside and outside of the building. There will be noise and the smell of gas, as testing has shown that metering stations emit methane 24/7. This complex will be directly across the street from my home. It will be less than 1/3 of a mile from an elementary school. Let me give you a sample of what a 2-building complex looks like. I am submitting pictures I took on my cell phone. Pictures do not begin to portray what this complex is like. I urge people to stop by the site on Shaker Road in East Long Meadow, across the street from the new Bay Path building, to see and hear, and yes, smell what a 2-building complex is like. Then I ask you, does a far bigger complex belong in the middle of a heavily populated neighborhood in Long Meadow? At one of Eversource's open houses, they assured me that the proposed POD will not affect my health or my property values. I respectfully ask you, do you think they answered truthfully? Thank you for attention this evening. Did you go through the different pictures? There's front and back and along the sides. That's from the back. There's two buildings, but there's also some structures. And then there's this, which is separate, which is piping, which is a short distance. That's the back, one of the back corners. There are no homes near this facility. The only neighbor is Bay Path to one side and then a business set back away on the other, across on the other side. No houses near it whatsoever. But I ask people, stop at that, it's not very far. Stop and listen and smell it to get the full experience. Does this belong in a neighborhood in Long Meadow? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Do we have any further resident comments? Okay. Do we have select board comments? Mr. Gold?
I have two comments. The first one I wanted to make is I want to just thank the people who helped out Saturday at our shredding event and thank the residents for coming by. We collected somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 pounds. That's 5 tons. We'll get the exact quantities in a little bit, but it was pretty busy 2 hours, and I think it was successful, and I think the recycling committee plans on doing this at least once a year, so it was fun, very helpful. The other comment I want to make, and I know we've got it scheduled on our agenda, which is part of the review of the town meeting, but I wanted to make some comments because there's been a lot said in the press and other things about comments that were made at the town meeting, and I want to just express publicly my support for the town manager's comments at the town meeting. I thought they were appropriate, and I thought they were required, and whether the town manager is correcting a select board member who errantly thought that the MSBA covered windows that were less than 30 years old, that would have been me, or correcting other factual information. I think it's important that the folks at town meeting have a full sense of how different things, how different articles might impact the town government, our ability to implement them. And so I want to thank the town manager for weighing in where appropriate. We have a policy of not having the town manager give opinions, and I don't think there were opinions. It was more factual than anything else, and I just want to make that comment publicly. So thank you.
Other comments? I have a comment on the comments just made by our resident. Just a modest correction. Actually, Eversource did not file with the EFSB today.
They did not do it
They
today?
are going to file. They're going to file with the Massachusetts Educational Protection Agency, or Act. It's the first step, but they have told us they are going to file. So
Okay,
the filing.
They had said they were going to file today.
Well, they've said a lot of things, but this seems to be the case. So the public, the residents of Long Meadow and Springfield should certainly know that this is coming down the pike, and hopefully the select board will be as ready as we can be for what follows as goes on, and we will keep the community apprised as much as possible. Once we know, once they've actually filed something, they've yet to file it. So we're not sure what their preferred route is, what they're going to be doing. Well, we know where the start is, and we know where the finish is. How they want to get there is their filing will tell us. So it's now just a question of waiting to see their filing and moving on from there, and we will keep you appraised. We have the town manager's report at this stage.
Thank you. So for a COVID-19 update, as of May 13th, the health department is tracking 118 cases. Positivity rate in town is 8.99%. Positivity rate statewide is 6.35%, and Hampden County is 8.01%. This is based on May 12th data. The prior 2-week period, the positivity rate in Hampden County was 5.25%. So as you can see, the numbers are continuing to increase, and people with symptoms are strongly encouraged to rapid test and report positive results to the Board of Health. There is a form online to do that. We're seeing that influenza cases are on the decline from a high of 15 in April to just 2 cases in the month of May. An update on Bliss Pool. We received a quote from an engineering firm to design the improvements needed at the pool, prepare the bid documents, complete the permitting, and oversee the construction work. The estimate for this design and engineering work is $96,000. We have not decided yet how to proceed, as we have no funding source identified for this design work. Annual town meeting, I do know we're going to be discussing this later, but there were 291 registered voters at the town meeting. We'd like to express a huge thank you to all the volunteers and town staff for their help in ensuring a smooth meeting. The Winter Recovery Assistance Program, also referred to as WRAP, this is a state program, the last done in, I think, 2014. But the state has provided supplemental funding for transportation networks in response to this past winter's harsh weather. The apportionment is based on our local roadway mileage, similar to Chapter 90. Long Meadow is going to be receiving $280,000, $823.12. This is, again, similar to Chapter 90 in that it's a reimbursement program. And an update on Greenwood Pool concerning lifeguards. We're still experiencing a significant issue with hiring lifeguards. Parks and Rec interviewed 14 applicants, made 14 offers, and only 7 have replied so far. 2 of those who replied stated that they had found other employment. Parks and Rec director and assistant director are going to be working on options for staffing the pool, which could possibly include reduced hours and/or a shortened weekly schedule so that we can fulfill all the hours required with properly trained lifeguards. To run the pool for the hours and the days per week that we traditionally do, we'd need a minimum of 10 full-time lifeguards with a long list of substitutes. And that concludes my report tonight.
Okay, we have
Questions?
There's- yeah.
questions.
A lot of questions.
Yes.
Start with
All right. Yes, we'll
So,
go this way.
I guess, one thing as far as the lifeguards, I hopefully, that we've contacted some local colleges too. We have students coming back, all the graduations just had. Maybe if we get out some more advertisements, we could get lucky, find somebody who just is coming home to the area who's qualified. But the other thing is this $280,000. Do you know what that'll be used for? Will it
Roadway
be used on
work.
roads or?
Yep, roadway work.
So like potholes and stuff? Do you know when that will start?
We have to use it by, I think, the end of the next fiscal year.
Okay.
So we have not sat down yet to identify exactly where we're going to target that $280,000.
Okay. Well, as a person who spends most of his driving in town, I'd love to see potholes get filled up. So, thank you, Lynn. Thank you.
On Bliss Pool, so just wanted to make sure, I get a lot of questions about this. So Bliss is, the work is on the chlorine, the storage room, and then the drainage. Is the actual pool itself okay?
Yes.
Okay, so it's those 2 things, so that is almost $100,000 just to figure out how to tackle this.
Yes, and figure out how to tackle it, do the design,
Oh, and
do the
oversee.
permitting,
Okay.
and then oversee the construction.
Oh, so actually, that's a pretty good chunk of it then. Well,
Yes,
we'll see.
but it's not to actually have a company come in and do the work or buy the parts and
okay.
materials.
And it's not funded anyway.
Right.
So on Greenwood, I was talking to someone who said that one of their kids applied to be a lifeguard and was offered less than minimum wage because it's a seasonal job. You know if that's correct?
I believe those positions for lifeguards are at least minimum wage as of right now. We did do some substantial increases in rates to try to make it more attractive.
That was even my
Yeah.
question. So is that still, are we still in this process? We have 5 now and still looking for more? at
We are definitely
competitive
looking
rates?
for more. I will tell you, it's very hard to compete with Six Flags and the state parks. They upped their rates a lot last year, and it's not something we'll ever be able to compete with.
So we need people just to do it for the love of the town.
Yeah. Better work environment, hopefully.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
true. I worked at Six Flags. Nobody should work there. It's a bad place to be a lifeguard.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to go back to this RAP funding of $280,000. So if my numbers are right, there's our Chapter 90 is somewhere around 460 or 400 some $1,000, and we appropriated through at the town meeting another $400,000 for streets. So together it's like $1.14 million. Is this all going to be toward street repairs then, and rather than?
With capital, you're saying? The 1.4?
Right, with
Yeah.
capital plan. I mean, because frankly, in the past, we've used Chapter 90 money to buy trucks and buy things rather than do repairs to the streets, and I'm just wondering.
We won't be using Chapter 90 to buy equipment.
Okay, so.
It'll be to fix roads.
So somewhere between now and when we have to spend it, which is usually
Yes.
a year from now.
Yes,
So-
it's, yeah.
Okay, so will we go down the list of priority roads that we already have, or are we gonna go create a new priority
I
list?
think what we will likely do, and again, I have not yet met with the DPW engineering team, is we will likely look at the list that we were already planning to put out this year and make sure those numbers are still good, because, you know, as we're all experiencing, the cost of everything has gone up, and it's possible that that 280 will get absorbed by cost increases on projects that we already had queued up to go. But I can give you a much further update at the June meeting, once I've had a chance to sit down with staff.
Okay. The other thing, I just had a question about something that showed up in one of the monthly reports. There was an appeal about that was supposed to take place a week or so ago for requiring sprinklers in a building in town. I was wondering what happened with that? Did we prevail in
We did
requiring?
not prevail.
So there will not be sprinklers in the
Correct.
building?
The decision was made right then and there? Is that,
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
that was my question too. Okay, so, no sprinklers in the building. Okay. Any other comments on these reports?
Do you have some?
Excuse me, Mark. I do want to remind you that through town meeting, we did appropriate some of that Chapter 90 money toward the Long Meadow Street project for easements as well. So we won't have a full $1 million going toward the roads. It'll be around $800,000.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, we have some guest speakers. Discuss the Anti-Racism Coalition, folks. Please come on up. Yes.
Hey folks, thanks for taking the time to listen to myself and Zach. My name is Ryan McCullum. I live with my wife Maureen and my daughter Esme at 12 Long Meadow Street here in town. So the Select Board was the entity to proclaim racism a public health crisis and appoint the task force. Clearly the acts we just witnessed in Buffalo show that the Select Board was correct in doing so. I had the honor to serve on the task force, spent many, as a volunteer, we were all volunteers, spent many a night in meetings over Zoom, in daytime researching and writing a bunch of stuff. In addition to the meetings, we had public hearings, we solicited the public for input and wrote a report. We even ironically endured a racist Zoom bomb, complete with the use of the N-word, in one of our meetings. The ball has been in your court ever since we submitted the report in early May last year. If it is truly a health crisis, then we need to act. I understand that budget concerns are an issue, but again, is it truly a public health crisis if we aren't willing to make it a priority? Intentional and deliberate are two words I constantly use when we're talking about anti-racism. If folks truly care about eradicating racism, they must be intentional and deliberate about it, or it's simply just talk or virtue signaling. Zach is going to present just 3 simple things from our report that you have, that you could execute. We get that the schools are doing what they are doing, but that is only one aspect of our town. Lark has been awesome, and they are keeping the conversation front and center as they should. As one of the few people who look like me who live in this town, I was immensely proud of my town and this select board in taking the intentional and deliberate steps it did in proclaiming race a public health crisis and appointing the task force. But let's follow it all the way through to the end. Let's be intentional and deliberate about doing so. Let's not just let your actions serve as lip service or virtue signaling during a time when so many were doing just that. Let me continue to be proud of this town. So Zach's going to go through a few things that I think should be fairly easy to execute, and then we'll be able to answer any questions that you all have after Zach goes.
Zach Veriden served as the chair of the Coalition for Racial Justice Task Force. Proud to serve alongside Ryan with that task force, and here again this evening serving our community. Currently reside with my wife and 4 children at 24 Pinewood Hills in town. And of the myriad recommendations that the task force made in our report, I'd like to call our attention to 3 of them most prominently here this evening. As research has shown that a lot of folks who identify as white do so socialized into a world in which they are taught not to see color and to not appreciate differences in race or class. And as a result, oftentimes folks that identify as white don't appreciate the discrepancies, the marginalization, and the oppression that exists within different communities across the country. And so as a result, I'd like to hold up and highlight 3 particular recommendations from the task force report. The first one is for the select board to interview and select a firm that can help the town conduct an equity audit that will highlight and call attention to racial discrepancies across different data points that the town tracks. A second is to interview and select a firm that can help conduct a diversity and racial justice training for members of the select board to help further deepen their understanding and awareness of those discrepancies and how they play out in real time. And the third is to potentially create a standing committee that can inform and offer advice to the select board on actions moving forward as they move through the potential recommendations offered by the Coalition for Racial Justice Task Force. And with that, Ryan and I welcome any questions that you may have.
Anything, folks? Yes, Mark.
Just thank you for emphasizing these 3 items. I think they're important. I think they're obviously actionable and something you can handle. I think we're going to come back to you because, very frankly, I wouldn't know where to go about to try to select a firm for an equity audit or to select a firm to conduct diversity and racial training for us. But it sounds like it's something that needs to be done. So if you have some ideas, we welcome them either now or feed them through to the town manager, who ultimately does the work for us.
Yeah, we do. I mean, not to show preference publicly. I mean, I sit on a board of 2 that I can think of off the top of my head, but there are several in the area that do some of that work that we're describing. Some better than others. I'm sure you can get references from other towns and other organizations that have done equity audits as well. So we can submit those through the town manager or through the chair of the select board.
Thank you.
Again, I agree with you both. I think that there was steps taken, but it's easy to lose track of what is important. This is very important, and I'm glad you brought this back to our attention and keeping our feet to the fire. That's important. Is this? I know I've been reading the reminder about equity audit. Is it Hamden Wilbraham just did a vote on this, or is that maybe that was the school district?
I'm not aware.
Okay.
I'm not aware.
But as you also know, in this town, we do have often run into budget issues. How much does the audit work that you are suggesting, how much would that typically run?
I wish I could give you a ballpark, but I can't. I think it depends on the size of the town. I think it depends on how much information you all have at your ready to hand over to whatever firm you might select. I think it depends on the depth of, like, how many departments are we going to do? Is the school already doing something with CLE, so we don't have to include the school? So I think the interviewing piece with these different firms is for them to do a fact-finding. I don't think they would even be able to give you a ballpark before they start asking you all some questions, so.
I hate to ask that question,
No,
but, you know,
it's-
it is gonna come up, and it will be determinative to some extent.
Yeah, and if I can, these recommendations that we've provided, I think are on the more feasible end of cost in terms of the implementation. One of the recommendations that the task force made that we thought would be probably have the largest budget implication, but perhaps the largest impact, is the creation of an equity officer for the town who can oversee and implement these things through to fruition. That's obviously an FTE that's an ongoing cost and would be significant. But I would think that something like a equity audit, which could be a one-time report, or an equity training, which could be a 1 to 2 day training, would be far more readily accomplishable in terms of what's available in the budget and where you could go find, I think, money to be able to support those things, and would have a significant impact on the board's ability to pursue priorities moving forward.
Yeah, and on the training side, you know, I can say somewhere between $750 to $1,000 a person for a 2-day training, right? So we're not talking about $4,000 maybe for you all to get some diversity training in a 2-day session.
Yeah, Tom?
And I don't know if there's a budget already for professional development for our select board, but that might be something where there's already money.
Mhm. Well, hopefully we have some money, because we usually go to a state conference, and we stay, you know, and so that's been less money the last 2 years because of COVID, and hopefully we can find some money there, which I'm hoping we are. But, you know, I do a little bit of work for this insurance company, and today they sent me this invitation to do some diversity training, and, you know, but yet 7 years on the board, I haven't had to do any diversity training. And I think that we're way past due for this kind of stuff. The other thing is this third point, you know, having a committee. I could see how a committee like that could be valuable in a lot of different ways, because we look at how the community is impacted by things like zoning, you know, or you know, the building committee, and different the school committees and so forth, and having a committee that would, you know, be there like as a consultant for them, you know, is really important, because I think that's the hard part. And I think, you know, Zach's, or actually I think, you know, your comments about folks just sort of ignore the whole discussion about different cultures and skin colors and everything else, and they really do a lot of people a disservice. And so only by having someone in the room who's sort of waving the flag saying, oh, by the way, you know, we need to keep track of this and notice how this impact is going to affect a lot of other folks who are not like the people in this room, but who are residents of our town. And so, you know, that committee, what are your feelings about it? Would you want to take the committee that we have already established and more institutionalize it, are you thinking, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the world's your playground a bit as the entity that created the task force, but you could also create an advisory board with as many members as you think should be on it, and you can ask folks who serve in the task force. I know there's some folks, and not to speak for them personally, but I know there's some folks who served on the task force who would probably say no, because they did a lot of work already and they haven't seen anything happen.
Okay.
And so, and am I wrong in saying that? And so there might be folks from the task force, there might be folks from the school, and there's other folks that you don't know of. So I think maybe an ask of folks like you did before, to serve on this advisory board or whatever you all want to title it, makes sense. And it's great to hear you say things like zoning and things that folks don't think about as typically racial issues to throw their way, right? It's not always criminal justice, it's not always hate crimes. There's things that everything has a lens of racial and social justice. So it's good to hear you mention a topic that folks wouldn't traditionally think about of doing with race. So yeah, it's whatever you guys, or you folks, sorry, try not to genderize my talk. Whatever you folks think or deem fit, I would do it if you asked. But I don't think you can just take the whole task force and ask them to do it.
Yeah, a couple of quick follow-up comments to Ryan's thoughts. One, I know at an earlier stage, I had been contacted by members of the select board about potential next steps and what to do with the recommendations from the Racial Justice Task Force. And I was asked to ask the Coalition for Racial Justice Task Force if anybody from the group would be willing to serve on a potential standing committee moving forward. And there was multiple members that said, at this stage, I don't believe the town is serious about the work. We've put in a lot of time, a lot of energy, put forth what we thought was a strong report, and it's clear that the town's not serious, so I'm no longer interested in serving. So that, I think Ryan's accurate in stating that. And I would also agree that whatever the select board might, in their wisdom, think is the appropriate structure for an advisory committee, it is very much up to your discretion and very much your playground. I do appreciate, Tom, what you shared about the state conference and having funds, but those funds being depleted by COVID in recent years. I would encourage the select board to potentially wrestle with the reality that I think everybody in the room would agree that COVID was a public health crisis, and we did prioritize funds to deal with COVID and all that entailed. The select board did declare racism a public health crisis in our town, and yet we haven't been able to find the funds for that.
Yeah. So like I said, Lynn, I know we had talked about possibly getting some training through Mass Municipal Association, right? Did you thought they might have something in diversity training at one point?
Through Mass Municipal, I'm not aware of a training.
Okay.
But I do, if I could, I did want to share with you one piece of positive news. And at I think it was your last select board meeting, you had a presentation from the assistant town manager about a grant submission that we just made on May 5th. It would, from what I've just heard you say about an equity audit, it sounds very similar, but we're calling it a DEI strategic plan. So we've submitted for that. The cost estimate we received from the firm that we spoke with was $25,000, and it was broken out over several different quarters over the next 2 years. And that was really more of a deep dive into town department operations, less external, more internal. So I'm happy to say that we've made that effort, at least, that we know that internally we need to look at specifically like our HR practices, our policies. But what's nice about this application is it goes one step further, and you touched on this a little bit, Ryan, our zoning, our bylaws. They need a really fresh look to see if those in and amongst themselves are perpetuating practices that really should not exist anymore. So this grant, if funded, would also look at that as well. So it's a big thing. And it sounds similar to an equity audit, but it maybe is a bigger, longer practice.
Sure.
But I did have one question for you, if I could. Your coalition had 9 members. If a standing committee was going to be set up, do you think that's a good amount? Do you think it should be less? It could be hard to get 9 people together, so I'm just curious what your feelings were on the size of the group.
I mean, I guess it depends on the quality of the folks, right? So 9 people could be great, and four, you know, anywhere between 7 and 9, I think makes sense. I don't think any less than 7, any more than 9. I don't know what your thoughts are. I guess that's kind of just a feeling, thought, and experience on these kind of groups.
Yeah, I think, and this could be perhaps part of a larger DEI strategic plan, but I think there's also a timeline and a horizon that might impact the thinking around the size of the group. So if, for example, the town was committed to being able to potentially hire somebody that could serve in a full-time equity position, focused on social justice and inclusivity for the town, but recognize it may take 2 or 3 budget cycles to get there. If you're looking for a standing committee to be able to serve and advise the select board for 2 or 3 years, you might need a smaller group of folks in order to make that type of commitment. But if you don't foresee being able to make the commitment as a town to an equity officer or a DEI officer who's able to ensure that those issues are front and center and represented in every conversation and every meeting that takes place, you might want a different size group.
And if I could, Madam Manager, that's awesome news. And I hope you can get the grant, and if there's anything we can do to help support attaining that grant, please let us know.
Thank you.
But I just, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of all the visits you could do. We give money to like a cultural committee to put on different cultural affairs in town, and it would be great if one meeting a year, your group could sit with them. If one meeting a year you could sit with the financial committee, sit with the zoning board. And like we say, if we're going to come together with a long-range plan for the town, and because if you had a sort of a spiel, that you could deliver to each different committee that works the town, just to bring them up to speed with where, and I think we could do all this kind of stuff before an audit committee, just to, because there are folks who are on these committees, who serve on these committees, who just, need to sort of be woke up a little bit about the situation.
While I appreciate that, I am by no means an expert in any of these things, right? And so, besides being, a black man, I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable sitting in front of the zoning board and trying to dissect, where there's inequities when it comes to race in our zoning laws from the 1800s. But I think the DEI work would hopefully do that, if that grant does that, or the audit could do that, or big picture, somebody hired by the town could do that. We wouldn't mind sitting with each board and talking to them. I think the advisory role of this committee is kind of to hold your feet to the fire as taxpayers and members of the community, about the importance of this. And then things like this, like, hey, do you know any firms that would be interested? And you ask us, and then we can provide that. But besides sitting on a couple boards, my expertise is not in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I know enough to be dangerous, but that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do a couple things, though, even though you deny your expertise. I do believe that for folks of the community to hear from people of the community is very important. The expert from the outside who knows it all is important too, but for residents of the town to hear from other residents of town, I think is very significant and can be very powerful. I do have a question about apparently the schools are taking a lead on this, and in terms of it seems to me not to be, for a better word, the most efficient way to have schools going down one track and the town going down another. They should be all coordinated together. And it sounds like the schools have a fairly big head start versus the town side of what's going on in terms of diversity training, or at least addressing the issue. Am I right about that, or?
Yeah, I think they are 2 different tracks. Like, my daughter's 2. This is the first time I've been in this high school since town meeting. So, like, the schools doing what they're doing and spending money and prioritizing DEI is great for the schools, and hopefully there's some spur-off impact that me, as somebody who's not involved in the schools, might feel. But they're two different things. And so we can't just say, all right, the schools are doing it, let's let the schools do it.
I'm not saying let the schools do it, I'm saying we should coordinate with the schools, because basically, they all, whether the daughters too or graduating high school, they all come
Yeah.
out of school and they're all residents of the town, at least for a little while, and that's, impactful. So I would just, and I don't think they need to be parallel tracks, is what I'm saying. And if the school's actually doing something, then maybe the rest of the town can learn about what they're doing, and that can be helpful to us.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mean to be flippant by it, but, so, and I love the chief of police here. He's been great, but again, there's a lot of different dynamics in a town or in a community that are outside of the school, that won't necessarily impact where we say, all right, yes, the town should know what the schools are doing, but there's some work like going for this grant that probably don't include the schools, right? So if anything, it's that the town is behind the schools, like you said, and we kind of need to catch up for the places where they're not tackling.
Yeah, and what I would say is, like, for me personally, identifying as a white guy who has tried to spend a lot of time reflecting on my own identity and the different privileges that I hold and trying to analyze those with a critical lens, I recognize that this is a lifelong work for me, and I'm never going to one day have arrived, right? Like, I'm on the journey, and I'm inviting other folks to come along with me that might identify similarly, or not, but I want everybody to come along. Other folks are going to be on the interstate and hit at 65 already. Some folks just need to be encouraged to turn left and get on the on-ramp, right? So I don't know that the schools being a little bit further ahead should necessarily be a deterrent. I think we all need to get in the car and turn the ignition and get on the gas and start heading in the same direction. And while the schools might have a little bit of a head start, one of the recommendations of the task force was that there should be some sort of liaison between the schools and the town and whatever effort or initiative we undertake, so that we're not duplicating efforts, because there is so much of this that we can be doing together. And so while we can recognize and acknowledge that the schools spent 2 years undergoing an equity audit complete with recommendations from CLE, I don't think that precludes us from saying maybe we're starting a little bit behind, but we can still set up a liaison. We can still learn from their work. In fact, a lot of their work and their findings may very well move us along faster, so that we can get up to speed on the interstate and not have to take 2 years ourselves to begin the journey. But it's also not a linear path. Once we get on the interstate, there's going to be detours, there's going to be construction, right? Like, it's not easy work to try and break down and disrupt patterns of marginalization and oppression. So I would say that the schools doing the work is probably a benefit to the town if we do, in fact, try to coordinate with some sort of liaison, because we can jump in right alongside and try and catch up and get up to speed based on some of the learnings and the hard work they've already done.
Yeah, in fairness to the chair, that might be what you were trying to say, I guess, and maybe I took it the wrong way. But maybe a fourth recommendation is a liaison to the schools, so that if there are things that we don't necessarily want to duplicate or we can learn from, to push the town to the same place where the schools are, or not to spend money where the school's already spending money. I think that makes sense. It was very apparent, and we made sure to follow it throughout meetings at our task force. Is the schools, we weren't charged with talking about the schools when you all enabled or created the task force. So, and it was always hard to kind of walk that line, because we would hear about incidents at the school or things coming from schools. So we always kind of said, well, that's the schools, and we're focusing on the rest of the town.
Okay, well, hopefully we can all focus together.
Yeah.
As long as we're using electric cars on the highway, that's the important thing.
I thought that was implied.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, very much for your presentation, and hopefully you won't come back with people saying, we're really,
Yeah, I don't wanna-
we're not getting anywhere. So
I don't want to
hopefully
be
we'll get
here a
somewhere.
year from now, May 2023, saying the same thing.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for coming in. All right.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank all these folks for coming here to support us as well, publicly, so they,
Small part of our group.
It's all part of your day,
I
yeah.
hope we were helpful.
Thanks, Saul.
Saul, you're everywhere all the time.
I have 2 copies of the reminder if you want to read about the park. You're welcome. Should I leave them here?
Oh.
Sure.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
Page 15.
Page 15.
Thank you.
Okay, approval of the minutes of last meeting, I assume, no, the April
No, it's
meeting.
2 meetings ago.
2 meetings ago.
I'll move we approve the minutes of April 19th, 2022.
I'll second that.
No discussion, all those in favor, were you not there for that?
Abstain.
3 to zip. The town manager evaluation process. So we have a form that we are supposed to fill out online and send it back online. No.
I believe in the past, we've had members of the select board submit it to the chair, and the chair sends over to me. This one, you just download and you can email it to me, you can print it out, bring it in to me, whatever.
And when do we want this done by?
I think that was part of the discussion that we wanted to have tonight, what was the time frame?
Yes.
Yes, usually you try to wrap it up before your new board takes form.
So we're talking about the next meeting. It's like one more week before the election.
Yeah, we have June 6th and the 21st, but the election is in between those 2 meetings.
Right, so we'll have, the reorg meeting is the 21st.
Correct.
So we want the evaluation before that meeting, correct?
So if you submit all of these, however you're submitting them, before June 6th,
Yeah.
I mean, that gives you 3 weeks, well, we have an extra Monday this month, so gives you a little more time.
Yeah, so we should have them in by June, yes?
Steve, I don't even recall how many times you've gone through this, but the process of late has been a compilation and not a summary, so the chair, I think it might even be Mike, just takes all the responses from the 4 of us and puts them into a single document that says, here's Tom's answers, here's Josh's answers, Steve's answers, and Mark, and that becomes the document. Nobody tries to say the consensus was or makes something from them. So it really is 4 separate evaluations into a single document. Because we found that it was very difficult, Tom, you probably recall, very difficult for somebody to have to be the editor of, well, what did he mean by that, or what did they mean by something else? So it just includes it all the way it was. And so, to me, that makes it a little bit more straightforward, because the requirement is simply a cutting and pasting of the 4 different documents together, rather than something different from that.
Yeah, there has been different approaches over the.
That seems to be the one that's worked the last couple of years, right?
I remember we would discuss the evaluations of the town manager in the board. You know, we would discuss how they fared. You know, the chair would always make a presentation. I can't remember if we did that last year.
Well, the thing is that, you're right, there's a discussion, but the discussion is simply, and it probably would be at the next meeting, each person saying, here's what I said, and here, but I don't think the chair gave tried to put words in your mouth or my mouth, or read into whatever Josh may have written. It's simply 4 people reporting, here's the town manager's, here's what we each thought of the town manager, and I remember the form because I helped build it, but if you get, a 5, a 5, a 5, and a 1, somebody's gonna, we wanted to do that, and we thought that taking the averages was meaningless, because that's a perfect case where the average shouldn't be, 3.3. The average was 5, 5, 5, 1.
Yeah, that makes sense, because you want to know where the 1 came from. So yeah, there's no reason to break it out.
And
If you report the average.
the issue, Josh, is that the numbers are less important than what's written
Sure.
about it. But we've had people in the past who just put down a 2 and moved on, or put down a 5 and moved on. And so you don't really, because it just says, excels, better than expected, meets expectations, below expectation, whatever it is, and didn't part, something like that. So there, there's it doesn't tell you much if you're just checking a box, but people can do that, and you're more than privileged to do that. I mean, there are people who, and I don't think it's anybody on this board, but we've had people in the past that looked like the 10 minutes before it was supposed to be handed in, they just went check, 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 and I don't think it was for Elin, it was for, check, 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 and sent it in. There wasn't a word written, and that's kind of worthless.
Right.
I mean, the goal is to give Lynn something to work on.
Well, in my first years on the board, there was a lot more controversy in terms of the, what people would rate the town manager. There was a lot more discrepancy in some of the comments in certain areas. And that is no longer the
How do you know?
preference. That is, I think
That is not in yet.
things are pretty consistent. But the other side is that we want to, I think it's important to give the town an idea of what we think about your work. But, you can't read every comment. But I do know, there was an article in the paper at one point, and I looked and I'm reading and I said, gee, they get this quote about something I said about Stephen Crane. And I realized they got it from the report, from the evaluation that I had written for him.
It's a public document.
Yeah, it's a public document. So these things aren't, it isn't just like something no one ever looks at. So, but we also need to give the town some idea of what we think how Lynn's doing, and I agree with Mark that it should just be like, we can't say everything, but we should summarize the written comments and then just clearly say these are the numbers. This is how the numbers work.
Well, why are we summarizing the comments? It's only 10 questions.
Yeah, if I
Well,
may, I
because it could
believe
be
all the
quite long.
comments were listed all together.
Every one of them, right.
Yeah.
There
Well,
was
we
no
can,
summary of comments at all.
the report should have everything, but what's, when you talk about it, we're not gonna read some people write a lot, some people didn't write much at all last year. I was kind of disappointed with some folks who didn't write comments who were on the board, but, I think that we owe it to Lynn to put some information about how we think she's doing. Yeah.
Steve, if I can, one of the things that I found useful was certainly, I think it was a month or so ago, you gave us a halfway through the year kind of summary of where we stood on goals. And I don't know if that can be updated or needs to be updated or just work on that, but certainly if we're all working from the same facts, one of us may not like the facts as well or think that you didn't do as well as we had hoped or whatever it is, but at least we all have a set of goals. And I'd like to get that updated and suggest that document at least ought to be appended to whatever the summary is, because that represents not only Lynn's opinion, but where we stand relative to what we said is what was important to be done. What do you think?
Well, I think if we actually discuss this at the June 6th meeting, which is the meeting before reorg, then I think this is the 16th, I think if we can get this done, get this stuff to me by June 1st, I can get it off to Mike and have it all ready for, that sounds reasonable?
Mike, can you send out the form tomorrow separately, so I can add it to my tasks?
Okay, so June 1st is
June 1st is the,
and we send it to my administration,
send it to me and I'll get it to Mike.
to Steve.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I mean, just so, and people at home may not know what we're looking at, but the areas, if I recall, and I'm sure I'm going to miss one, were things like communication, budgeting, personnel. There were some big topics, and under each one, it was, some specifics. Thanks, Mike's got it up on the screen, but we were trying to identify the key elements for the town manager to execute what it is. Obviously, it doesn't talk about every task, but it does talk about things like planning and budgeting and dealing with the staff and things like that, so I think it's important. In relation to the media and community, I think that was the other one. But-
We could find out what the media was, that would be.
Well, no, but I think the point was, when somebody calls town hall and they say, we don't talk to the public, and they hang up, that's very different from, how can I help you, and what can I do for you? And I think it's important that, unfortunately, we may not know all of it, but I think surprisingly, we get a lot of feedback and do know more than we sometimes let on.
Okay,
June 1st.
June 1st. Yes, okay. Yes, by June 1st. I need it June 1st. Okay, on to a debriefing of ourselves for the annual town meeting, which went not too badly, seemed to me. Yes.
I suggested this be put on the agenda, and the reason I did is because I think that there are always things we can do better, and there are some things that we definitely could do better after the town meeting, although it did run relatively smoothly, and I think I'd rather, I know it's terrible to do this, but I'd rather focus on the areas we need to do better, and rather than just pat ourselves on the back for all the things that went well, and there's a lot that went well. And I think part of the issue for me was that the proceedings were a little bit tough to follow because of the consent agendas, and I had no problem with consent agendas, although to some degree, we may modify them, but there are people who said, did we approve, even on our table up front, did we approve that already, did we not approve it, as opposed to going through in some logical process of saying, we're at Article 1, let's take as a consent agenda Articles 1, 2, 3, and 7. Okay, now we're at Article 4. Let's take as a consent agenda Articles 4 and 5, that kind of thing. And then so that when we got to Article 39, we knew we were done, as opposed to, that's the one thing. The other thing that concerned me, and I'm going to make some enemies here, but if I'm not trying to avoid controversy at town meetings. That's the purpose of town meetings. I think discussion is meaningful, and I think it's important to have discussion. But if you look at the topics, the articles that have caused the most concern, the most discussion, the most number of people who weren't quite sure what was going on, over the last 3 or 4 years, they've all been community preservation articles. And I don't know how to address that. I don't know if we need to address it even, but I think it's important for people to understand, and I know the community preservation has a meeting later this week to understand that is that their intent, or is that not their intent, or is it good, bad, or not? A town meeting where everybody says, yeah, we all, means we'll get nobody to come to a town meeting. So controversy to some degree is good, but if it goes repeatedly in the issues, I think that concerns me. The other thing that concerns me is that we dropped a lot of articles at the last minute. We withdrew articles, and I think we need to think them through a little bit better. And I know we work on deadlines, but do we really want to push forward with an article that may be a little questionable at the time we're putting it together? Tom, I was shocked at the end when you stood up and decided to withdraw the fencing for whatever, for the Storrs Library.
Yeah.
I didn't see it coming. You probably didn't see it coming until just before the meeting, and that created all kinds of controversy. And I don't know if it's even our issue or if it's Rebecca Townsend's issue, but things like that kind of give the impression to me that these folks really know what they're doing, and that's the one thing I would want to not have happen at a town meeting. At least I think the town residents should think, the select board's got some business to achieve, and we're trying to go through it, and we want to answer questions, and we want people to object to it, but we want to make sure that people understand it. I just don't have a clue how you go about doing a better education job. I know, Lynn, we've tried it. This is the third time you tried it, and it never seems to work well. Anyway, that's my take on town meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Do we have any, yes?
My opinions on it.
Yeah, just to follow up, Mark, it's nice to see that people take their their responsibilities to the town seriously. And that when there was a change on the fencing, they said, well, wait a minute, we approved one thing, but it does make it a little more complicated. I think what I took away, the most important thing I took away from this meeting was that we're building momentum in terms of getting a town meeting and get back to where it used to be. But clearly, our town manager and our CFO answered questions in a knowledgeable way to help inform the public. They didn't always agree with it, unfortunately, but there wasn't any questions that were unanswered, where they're like, gee, the people working for the town are letting us down. And that is really important, and you'll continue to see that will happen meeting after meeting after meeting. When it comes down to like, well, what's really going on here? The town is still going to turn to the two of you more than any other folks, as far as the basics of our, what we should do. But we have a lot of interesting discussion, and I think it was a little confusing, jumping around number by number. I agree that was not that easy. But the other side is that you look at folks in the school committee, and they do a lot of work, and they did a lot of work on this budget, especially this year. And I was sort of disappointed that they weren't sitting up front with us. And I know when they have the high school graduation, they usually invite the select board to sit up there, because they see that we work as a team, and I think those folks should be up there. They're all volunteers, and they do a lot of work. So that would be the only thing that I would think I'd like to see a little different, and just return them to their proper status that they've had in the past years. That shouldn't be changing as far as I'm concerned. But other than that, it was a great meeting. The voting didn't seem to go that much faster, but it was very efficient and suspenseful. So.
Right. I think the thing, Mark, about the consent agendas, first time done, I think it's really not much more than, an extended conversation prior to the meeting with the town moderator, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page. And I think that was a learning, since that was a different way we did consent agendas. So I think we should have, we'll learn from that. And I don't think that would happen again. I would hope not. At one level, this warrant is made up pretty early before it goes to the beginning, and then, with the thing with the fence, if everyone liked the fence, what are you going to do about it? It was done, so it's, things do happen quickly, and I think by and large it went about as smooth as it was going to go, and I think that Tom was right. As long as the town officials can answer the questions that are asked, that's what folks want. Is that they want the town to function, and if there's a hiccup, there's going to be a hiccup. But just as long as I don't think we want to withdraw too many motions if we don't have to. But if that's going to make the most sense, so I think it went as probably as well as could be expected. I think the electronic voting was very interesting to see the number of votes up there. That was, and not a lot of close votes. So it was, but yeah.
Just on the consent agenda, the one difference for these motions this time that we've not had the last couple meetings for consent agendas, we grouped all the consent agendas at the beginning. That's generally how a consent agenda is handled. The difference was when somebody moved to pull something, it then got shuffled in the order of the article number of which it is. So I think that's where some of the confusion came from. Mm-hmm. We have lived and breathed this since February, so we were able to follow along and make notes, but I could easily see how someone who doesn't have as much internal knowledge about it could get easily confused. So I think that to me was one of the big differences for this meeting, is that we tried to consent agenda everything at the beginning and then address the individual articles later.
Right.
Maybe I can suggest if we like that process, then that's the way we ought to lay out the articles on the town warrant.
Yes.
So that their consent agenda one is the way it is. Because there's nothing saying we can't do them all in front, but that at least makes the consent agenda jive with the town warrant. And you can't do anything, and somebody pulls it, they pull it, but
Right.
that's fine.
Completely agree, yeah. We've already started our notes for next year.
So COVID kept me out last week, unfortunately, but I was rapturously following on my iMessages. Was 38 and 39, were those brought to the front before the consent agenda? And was that, people okay with that? I mean, I know we don't, but it was an
There's nothing you
overwhelming
can do.
vote.
The town meetings had a motion and it passed. so-
No, I know nothing we can do about it, but a lot of people voted to move it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Did that add to the confusion with the consent agendas, that we were taking things out of order already?
Probably. I mean,
Okay.
it definitely just changed the order, especially we had agendas at the meeting so that when people walked in, they could follow what the motions would be.
And it got thrown off immediately. I don't think we should necessarily put the hot ticket stuff at the beginning.
No.
'Cause
Josh,
then-
I'll give you an example. Somebody was texted me and said, I'm going to stay home. Call me when we're about at 39. And I said, if you want to vote for 39, it's
Yeah.
coming up quick because of the consent agenda, and it was moved forward. And, okay,
I mean, that's going to happen regardless, I guess.
Right.
You know what I
And
mean?
my point is, if you're not there, you don't get the vote.
Right,
If you want to vote, you be there. But
yeah.
Right. One of the other unfortunate pieces was we've been struggling with internet issues for the last almost 2 weeks, and that prevented town meeting from being aired live.
I was wondering if that was part of what was happening.
Yep.
The other thing is, every year, we give out a Citizen of the Year award, and, I mean, I was there the whole meeting.
We did not get any applications.
No one was nominated.
Damn, I could have won.
That's right. You could have nominated yourself.
Yeah. When you think of all the folks who donate time, you'd think
Yeah.
there'd be some, I have to turn to myself and say, next year, I'm going to nominate some people.
Yes, you can do that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay?
okay, thank you, Steve.
Okay, a new improved policy for investing.
Yes, we,
Now, the question is the yellow is the only new part of this, the stuff that shit, everything else is,
Yeah.
If I could, I did have a viewer at home ask if staff could identify themselves.
Absolutely. Good
Thank you.
evening. I'm Erica Brunel, the treasurer collector for the town of Long Meadow.
Thank you.
Jennifer Lyden, finance director. We're bringing together bringing an upgrade to the investment policy, section 3C1, to increase our amount of money in one particular bank from $8 million without bonds, $11 million with bonds, to $20 million regardless of the funding source. We would like to keep the 45% limit at no one institution, and we also want to reduce our risk exposure by limiting the banks that we're currently, that do not have DIF insurance to only $250,000. That was a recommendation from the Finance Committee. We're requesting this increase because of the low interest rates. Rates currently range from 0.01% to 0.5%. Right now, 5 banks fall between 0.3 and 0.5. That would allow us to increase, have some variability with the banks with the highest amount of leverage, basically with the highest amount of interest at the banks. If we were to lever these rates at the current month's balance, we would realize an additional $75,000 of simple interest over the year. Currently, in FY21, we realize $197,000 in interest with leveraging our different bank accounts, and that was restricted with the $8 million. Right now, we're at $94,333 through April. These numbers do not include OPEB. On Monday, May 9th, we met with the Finance Committee to discuss this. They made a unanimous recommendation to vote to the $20 million mark. It was a well-discussed conversation. They did bring up again, reducing our risk with the banks that do not have the DIF insurance.
How many of those, how many are there that don't have?
Two.
Two.
TD Bank and
People's United.
People's United. So we would reduce our levels to 200, at the max 250,000. They are covered by the FDIC insurance. And we're looking at using anywhere between 3 to 5 banks for about $15 million per bank. The town treasurer, Erica Brunel, is here to ask for any detailed questions for you.
Tom?
I guess the first question is there any chance that this change would affect our Standard & Poor's rating? And are we AAA now, or are we AA?
We're AA plus, yep.
AA plus?
Mhm.
Okay. Would they care? Would they think we were being risky, or they think it's good? Would they go along with this?
I can't speak for them, honestly. We are keeping the other bank accounts open. We don't want to close any bank accounts in case there is a run on one particular bank. As advised by one of the Finance Committee members who was in a bank when there was a run on her bank, and we'd want to be able to, move the money as quickly as possible and keep our other bank accounts open.
Okay, yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yes.
There's an element of convenience, I guess, in addition to everything else, dealing with fewer banks when this comes up. So right now, one of the driving forces has been interest rate differences. But when there is no interest rate difference, or interest rate differences, difference between 0.1% and 0.3% is 300% or something like that. But the difference, if interest rates go up. So my question is, the application of this policy is as important as the policy itself. How do you folks who are going to be applying this see that moving as we potentially get to where there may be no difference in interest rates at the top, and it may be, in other words, are we saying don't worry about this $15 million, $20 million maximum? Or we're saying, it's better to be lower than higher, and if it's not the same interest, we can, and if it is the same interest, we can kind of deal with the convenience factor and split the money up. So where do you sit with that thought?
Well, if you don't mind me jumping in, I think having the convenience of multiple bank accounts and additional bank accounts also lends itself to when we go out to borrow. So we'll have more access to different bank accounts so that we can diversify those funds. If we go out to bid for the school, we're going to have a large amount of money, and if we can't go over $20 million, we're still going to need a large portfolio of different bank accounts. So yes, convenience is a huge part of it. I think that even if the interest rates do tend to be similar in the near future, I think allowing us to spread out those funds, but not necessarily have to jump on transferring them. For instance, right now we have a main bank account where most of our deposits go into on a daily basis, and I have to go in every day, if not every other day, to transfer the funds, because during real estate time or a large motor vehicle commitment, we immediately go over the limit. So we have to constantly change those funds. So the convenience of being able to wait, end a week to transfer funds rather than constantly being on top of the bank accounts with transfers, it's not only convenience, but it allows us to reduce a lot of human error. I mean, we're all human, we make mistakes. If there's a transfer error, we can easily fix it, but this, it's less touching of the funds. So we're monitoring it, but we're not touching them constantly. So I think it allows itself to benefit us in many different ways.
And just my other question, where did 45% come from as a maximum percentage?
That was the percentage that the Finance Committee recommended last year when this was brought to them, to increase it from 5 and 8 million to 8 and 11 million. That was the number that they suggested to reduce the risk.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, theoretically, isn't DIF insurance unlimited?
Correct.
DIF is, but two banks don't have DIF.
Well, that's why we're not going to give them more than 250, but it seems
Right.
to be, at one level, 45 seems to be, that's a lot. On the other hand, if it's insured up to, a gazillion, I'm not sure why we need to have the 45% limit.
We'd want to, if there was a run on the bank, we wouldn't want all our money in one bank either.
Well, I'm not saying, it would be less than 100, but, you know, okay.
So if this isn't too risky, why wasn't the limit higher last year when we made the change?
It's the best we could do last year.
Josh, there's a history, and it actually came from, it was partially the Finance Committee, but also the Audit Committee, who put actually the $5 million limit on it, and that's back when there were a lot of issues with banks in Massachusetts, a lot of consolidation going on, that kind of thing. So it really, it's a vestige kind of thing for $5 million, and at least it's been increased to $8 million, but the issue was that.
If you remember names like Heritage and Community, Savings Bank and Heritage, yes, they used to be banks. Vanguard, they were all banks at one time, and no, they're not.
Bank of Boston.
So, okay.
Mortgages sometimes.
So you want a motion for this, so do I entertain a motion to
Now, I'll make a
approve this?
motion, we adopt this revised investment policy.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're going from saving money to spending money.
So the bands in front of you are the last year of these projects at, I believe it's Farmalia and Kingsbury. They were initially banded, Kingsbury was $123,000, Farmalia was $104,000. We retired about $95,000 in FY21. We retired $72,000 in FY22, and we're looking to retire the remaining $60,000 in FY23. These bands went out to bid on May 12th. The lowest bid was 1.6%, and that was from the Adams Community Savings Bank. We are looking for a vote to award Adam Community Savings Bank a 359-day, $60,000 ban at the rate of 1.6%.
Jennifer, can you just verify, so this will close out or pay off these notes totally?
Correct.
This last round of bans?
Yes.
So these notes are done, okay. And you know, I go back to when bans were a lot cheaper than the bonding, and the question is, are we considering this process for funding other projects that are, I think that there's some requirement, has to be less than 3 years or 5, whatever it is, right? But are we continuing to consider doing this?
Absolutely. Last year, the ban came in, the awarded ban was 1.29%, so it went up to 1.6%, but the bids came between 1.6 and 2.5, so it is creeping up. But we work with the financial advisor. I sent her all the authorizations that were approved through town meeting, and you know, we'll work strategically to determine which ones we should ban and which ones we should bond.
Thank you.
Do you think it's conceivable that we would actually get a better ban rate by having more money in any of these banks? Is that, could it work that way?
I can't
Or is that just a
answer yes
little
or no.
pipe, is that a pipe dream?
I can't speak for them.
The answer is yes.
Can only hope. Do you need approval for this? Is that, or are we good?
I'll move we award Adams Community Savings Bank a 359-day, $60,000 bond anticipation note at a rate of 1.60%.
Second.
Any further? All those in favor? Motion passes.
Thank you, and we'll just need some signatures. I'm not sure if you want to do it now or
Yep.
If you
at
can-
the end.
yeah, I'll do that for you.
Okay,
It's all of the yellow spots.
thank
Some
you.
more stuff in my own.
Okay.
I move we appoint Town Treasurer Collector Erica Brunel to tax title custodian through June 30th, 2023 pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 60, Section 77B.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion passes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Okay. Sewer, water, stormwater rate discussion, or review of such rates.
Commissioners, I'm bringing 3 rates forward to you, water, sewer, and stormwater. The water rate request is, we're requesting to increase 2.51% from $3.59 per 100 cubic feet to $3.68, or a 9-cent increase. That's mainly due to an overall 4% increase in the budget related to the Springfield water purchase for a projected increase of 11.17% as submitted by Water and Sewer about 4 weeks ago. This increase is due to increases in operation and material expenses, such as chemicals, electricity, and lab testing, as well as the increase in capital costs that they're experiencing with the expansion and the upgrades at the water and sewer plant. The water purchase increase is offset by savings in salary costs and tightening up the budget for operational expenses. The debt costs approved at town meeting equate to about $125,000 a year. We're looking to use some of the retained earnings as well as ARPA funds to offset these projects as well. The retained earnings for water at the start of FY22 was about $721,000. With capital costs and other expenses approved at both town meetings, that reduced it by $400,000. We're looking at projected revenue excess of $250,000 and projected appropriation excess of $55,000. On Friday afternoon, I did request from Water and Sewer some projections for FY22. We look to be on target, even a little less, so we're hoping to save about $80,000 in our budget for water purchased. That leaves us anywhere between $688,000 in retained earnings to $760,000 for water for FY23.
I just question, since we've instituted this winter averaging, has that been calculated into these projections?
No, sir, it hasn't. I met with the consultant a couple of weeks ago on winter averaging, and we are still collecting data mainly for the June usage. He wants to wait till June and take a look at what we want to do is in, I believe, the second meeting in July, we'd like to submit what the bill would be without the 5-month average and what the bill would be with the 5-month average. Show you the winners, the losers, what the experience would be throughout the town. And if you approve going forward with the 5-month average, we'll look to put that in the first quarter bill in October for July, August, and September.
Okay, so all the numbers are adding up as far as we go with that. So,
Correct.
All right, great, thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, so Tom, that's the sewer, but right now you're talking about the water. So
Right
that-
now I'm talking
that
about the
Yeah, I
doesn't-
meant sewer, yeah.
Right, okay, so this
Yeah.
doesn't affect the, so, I had a chance a little bit to take a look at this today. The only thing that comment I would have is that we are working off of the same distribution charge for water and sewer that we have for the last several years, and I'm not looking to make a change now, and in fact, it would be minimal, in fact, or have a minimal impact on that right now. But I think, just as a comment, we ought to be looking at that $15.40 rate that we charge for a meter fee. The intent, in my opinion, was that it reflected much of the capital investment, so that people who use no water still contributed to the capital portion of the bill, of the water project. And so you know, I support the recommendation that Jennifer Layden brought to us today for 368, but just a comment that we ought to be looking at potentially making changes in the future at that, what I'll call the meter rate. The other thing I just wanted to point out, and I think, Jennifer, you said it, but I think it's worth mentioning, is we're increasing our rate 9 cents per unit. Unit of water in this town is 100 cubic feet. The city of Springfield is increasing their rate to us 16 cents a unit. So we're able to mitigate to some degree what city of Springfield is doing because of we're holding down the rest of our costs on water systems.
Okay. We're not going to vote on this tonight, is that correct? We're going to wait till the 6th unless we want to. We'll wait.
I just had another question.
Yes.
Why is our sewer rate so much lower than the average for the other towns?
I believe the cap has a lot to do with that, and the usage.
So when we go to winter averaging, our sewer rate is projected to go, well, it'll increase, let me put it that way. It's going to go significantly an increase because there's a lot of people paying for 300 units of water, which is the maximum, who are probably only putting 150 units down the sewer. So if you will, Josh, my answer to your question is that irrigation is subsidizing our water rates
I see, okay.
that you're not seeing in other towns.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it's 275 is not likely what we're going to get if we stick with our winter averaging for sewer rates. It's going to be more like $4 and change, if I recall correctly.
But when we voted in the winter averaging, Mark, didn't we say that there was going to be a minimum amount that people would pay if they didn't use any water in the winter?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, but
So, that's all been calculated in? That
it
figure?
hasn't been
It will
calculated
not
this
in
at
these
all.
numbers.
It will be. It's in a test environment right now. The
Okay.
5-month winter averaging.
Okay,
We
so.
needed to get 1 year of quarterly billing
Mhm.
done.
Yeah.
But the winter averaging is in a test environment right now. They're testing, I think, 3 bill runs, which we've projected to come to you in July with a full explanation of how 5-month winter averaging is going to look, who's
Mhm.
going to be most impacted, who's going to be least impacted, and give you an idea at that point what the October bills will look like.
And we had talked about 5 months,
Yes,
October, November, December, January, February, that's it?
I think it's
Okay.
November to April, if I remember right, or October 30th through March
Whatever,
30th or
okay.
something.
All right,
I have the
Mhm.
dates.
all right.
Okay.
No? So
Do you want me to continue with
motion
sewer and
to-
stormwater? or-
Go right ahead, as long as we're on water.
Okay. The sewer rate request to increase 1.85% from $2.70 to $2.75, or a 5-cent increase. This is mainly due to not using retained earnings to offset the rates. As you can see in the memo, if you've had a chance to take a look, the regional analysis shows that we are already the lowest in the comparable communities, as well as towns that purchase water or pay for sewer with the Springfield Water and Sewer Commission. We also have the retained earnings. I'm sorry. We started at $710,000. Capital costs were about $237,000. We have excess revenue we're projecting at $100,000, and excess in our appropriation about $50,000. That'll leave us about $622,000 in retained earnings, well enough to pay for the $50,000 in sewer bonds that were approved at town meeting. Any questions on sewer?
Can I just if I
Sure.
could. So the sewer bonds are coming out of this revenue. I just want, the payment of sewer bonds comes out of this revenue,
The retain, yes.
out of the retained earnings fund, okay. So that's where you're getting it, okay. And I guess I'll just make the same comment that, if you will, the base rate, which is the fixed charge for sewer, is $241,000. The fixed charge for water is $115,000. So, Josh, to answer another part of your question, the sewer rate is lower because if the base rate was the same 115,000, I can just put it in here, the rate would have gone up to $2.95. So part of the difference is also that we charge more for, if you will, base rate and sewage. And that's not a comment on whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. It's just that we charge, $241,000 for base rate and sewer, and we only charge $115,000 for base rate and water. And most of that's because of the way the bylaws were written way back when.
And stormwater increase 15.5% from $5.55 to $6.41, or 86-cent increase. That's mainly due to the select board policy set on January 20th, 2020, to increase the amount that the tax rate or the taxpayer pays by 4.11% each year. Expenses increased 6%, mainly due to the MS4 requirement for outfall testing and catch basin cleaning.
All good with that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, as long as we're on to debt here. Westcom.
So this Westcom notice of intent to incur debt, this came to you in November. You don't actually have to take a vote on it unless you plan to disapprove it. There's a 60-day window that each community has to respond if you choose to not want to support this. This is coming back to you again because there was it was sent to bond council after all the communities voted on it in November. As they were reviewing our district agreement, we realized it was out of date. Even though we had just updated it about 6 months prior, we hadn't gone back and added the new community that had joined since then. So it was just administration. We've now done that. We have an updated district agreement. You had a presentation on that in, I want to say, April. The board, Westcom board, got back together. We voted for this borrowing authorization, and now it comes to each member community. I just have to provide you notice of it, and the only vote you have to take is if you disapprove.
And when will all this be finished by, if all the communities say, okay?
July 5th is the 60-day window, and then Westcom will go out to borrow, and then project, the design is done, and we'll get it, the OPM is on board, and we would start construction. It's estimated to take about 2 years. And it's a renovation, so it's not a brand-new facility. It's Salter College, just to remind you.
Is Westcom going to move in as it's done, or is it waiting, is it not until the whole thing's done?
I believe that the goal is to get the dispatch center done so that they could move in, and then any of the other meeting room spaces or the lower level, which can be used as a training facility, that would come secondarily.
Now, Lynn, was that property taken by eminent domain, or was it just purchased?
Purchased.
Was on their sale?
Westcom purchased it last year.
First time might have been eminent domain. But okay.
Okay, thanks.
Where are we here? The annual town election warrant, which is June 14th.
I've just a point of order. Do we need to vote on the new rates for the water and sewer?
We're going to do that on the 6th.
Did what?
We're doing that on the 6th,
Oh,
next
we're doing
meeting.
the 6th, okay, this is just a warm-up, thank you, all right. So the election warrant,
Yes. Do we need to approve this?
Yes.
Just a motion to set the town election on June 14th, 2022.
all right, I'll make a motion that we accept June 14th, Tuesday, June 14th is our election day with this warrant that's presented.
Second.
Motion second, any conversation? We all good? All those in favor? Passes unanimously. A liquor license. One-day liquor license application for St. Mary's.
There are actually two of them in there. And, oops.
Yes, they're having two events.
I'm just trying to pull it up, so. I'll make a motion, we approve two one-day liquor licenses for St. Mary's. The first one for May 24th, 2022, 6 to 9 p.m. And the second one for June 3rd, 2022, from 5:30 to 9 p.m.
We'll second the motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Any comments on correspondence? Otherwise, I believe we're good. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll vote to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.